How much money is it?
He's not well. The guy's could have died like 5 times.
I don't know the exact dollar amount, so the line
I think Ozzy Osbourne was much older.
interest.
Doesn't feel that old to me. 75?
They get a
He just died. Do you have old age?
tax credit.
Some stuff.
Submission.
Oh, really?
He also had some extra throughout his life.
Like the drugs and alcohol.
David's working through that right now.
No, if I did that much drug and alcohol, I don't know how these rock stars play.
Yeah, they can afford to.
That could be.
Okay, my mic is open. I have to remember that.
They're already trying to get rid of it before they even close the deal. That's crazy.
Okay.
So we'll see. We don't know. This will go out in the next.
Heidi can't come, and then Tim can't come. So those two.
I mean, the bid, as long as you set it up and say, look, this is what we're trying to do, I'm sure you guys have got that all covered.
Who else are?
I bet you'll get some creative things. People just aren't asked those questions a lot. You know, these guys that build houses are building these big houses, you know, and they're not used to doing it on a smaller scale. But
Well, yeah, and it depends on who you get, and it depends on.
In the phone call earlier, I was like, I feel like when we had it, I was like, in my mind, I feel like Ellie is probably stressed.
Yep.
You know, they
Great,
say,
because it is stress. It's just like
this size, it's gonna be
we spend a lot of time on
it
it.
has to be, the driveway's gotta be 9 feet wide, you gotta have one car garage or whatever. And
But I think like
we're just trying to find
in life, if there's something wrong, you apologize.
to expand
It makes it way
first-time
better.
home
Things.
ownership
No, I'm not apologizing.
people who probably can't get homes otherwise.
It's better that you chat to us.
Later on, if they wanna have a garage,
You couldn't have gotten it
but what can we
without
do
all this
to
input.
get into like,
For like,
two-bedroom,
sure.
one-bath,
That was really good. Here's your
Good evening.
that's the way to do it.
Hello, everyone. Whoops. Hello, everyone. Let me get it a little closer. Thank you for all of you being here again tonight for the Comprehensive Planning Committee meeting. This is July 22nd meeting that we're going to begin. I just want to remind folks and myself as well, try to speak up at the meeting. The acoustics in this room are not the best. And some of us are a little harder hearing. I'm one of them. I've cranked up my hearing aids for you. But we appreciate it because everything you say is important and we want to make sure to hear it. Well, how about if I put it closer? I don't.
Nice.
All right. It's so close now I can't. I feel like it's going to bite me here. We're going to start, as we did at the last meeting, which was fun, with an icebreaker. And we have an icebreaker in chief here. She's been working on this since the weekend. And so I will turn it over to Lauren to break some ice.
Okay. Oh man, I'm nervous. Icebreaker in chief or whatever you said. Okay. Icebreaker question of the meeting is, if a genie came and descended upon the city of Auburn and granted each of you one wish, because it's a cheap genie, what wish would you make or ask for? And we'll start over, I think that's Adam. Did everyone hear that question? Was I loud enough? Okay.
You did not say that 10 million other wishes is
Oh,
off.
you can't
table.
ask for more wishes.
Too late. I think my wish would be that we make some of the transportation changes that we've been talking about for at least 20 years in the city. I'm Adam Lee, by the way.
And I'll add, it can be comprehensive plan related, or it doesn't have to be.
Virginia Keel, I would say to give unlimited funds to the city.
Woo.
I would say health, but that includes all kinds of health. So fiscal health, very important, but also health of our community members, our workers in the community, et cetera, et cetera.
Just a well-grounded, well-thought-out, practical plan that we can follow going forward.
That's hard to follow. Well, I have a specific piece of this wish, but the wish is for really wonderful pedestrian access. And Phil's going to laugh when I say this, because I asked the other day if some communities can do it for frogs, for street crossings, how come we can't? I mean, turtles, how come we can't do it in Auburn for people? So, some flyovers, some wonderful pedestrian amenities. Phil can tell you about the turtles.
I guess I would wish the genie would bring 500 units of affordable housing of a variety of types and make them available instantly.
If the genie would grant me one wish, I would want to wish good health to everyone in the city of Auburn and the opportunity to achieve their greatest wishes that they have with the skills and potential available.
I think I would like the genie to flick the wand and to make it so that everybody in the city, regardless of belief structure or political ideologies, could get in a room together, discuss hard issues, find some compromise and some common ground, and come up with some good solutions.
Particularly this committee.
We can always be the first person to start, right?
That's it. That's it.
I would like to have lower building costs.
Less altruistic than some of the ones I've heard, but I did read a lot of comments about it in our materials today. That Auburn has a skate park that rivals the Lewiston skate park.
I'm going to piggyback a little bit. I'm Matt, by the way. I'm going to piggyback a little bit off Becky's wish and wish for sort of comprehensive bicycle network of transportation rather than riding, I don't know, on Minot Ave or Court Street or pick your road.
So my genie is going to transform the parking lot at Great Falls into a park. And not only might there be a skate park there, there's a splash pad.
I would wish for or look for higher average household income for all our residents, because it seems like all good things in a community kind of spring from that.
Since we already have the wish of unlimited funds, I can go with, I kind of mirror a little bit what the mayor said, of just all types of housing available to meet the needs of all of our residents, regardless.
Well, I was recently told by my daughter that I'll be a grandfather soon, so it's exciting news. So I guess my wish would be that, my wife and I were fortunate to build on generational land, and so how that can continue for my kids, my grandkids, and be able to secure housing where they want to stay right here in Auburn. So.
I'll start by saying this did not go the way I thought it was going to, but that you guys are very comprehensive focused here. So keeping that, I guess it would be that we actually implement the comprehensive plan instead of it sitting on a shelf somewhere. We actually get through it, and maybe in 10, 15 years from now, we can say we did all or the majority of it.
Mm. Sounds like a good idea. I'll be back for the next one.
I would wish that the city of Auburn would have a soccer team and that Messi would play on the soccer team, and Auburn would be the epicenter of soccer because of that.
Allie, you can have.
I would say an excited and engaged community throughout the entire comp planning process.
Great. Thank you, Paul, your good thoughts and wishes. So let's do the roll call for the minutes. Rex, why don't we start with you? Just state your name.
Matt Duval.
Riley Bergeron.
Paul Jacques.
Dana Staples.
John Cleveland.
Jeff Harmon.
Becky Conrad.
Dennis Bergeron.
Kelly Butler.
Virginia Keel.
Adam Lee.
Allie Toby, Barry Dunn.
Lauren Cafe, City of Auburn.
David Hediger, City of Auburn.
Phil Kroll, City of Auburn.
Dennis Dote, City of Auburn.
And I would note that Rick Whiting did contact me, and unfortunately he apologized for not being here. If I'm correct, I think also Heidi Bertels is not here this evening. Tim Cowan is not here. Bruce Rio is not here. For the record. We have the minutes from our last meeting on June the 17th. I'd entertain a motion for the minutes.
Actually, can I make one slight typo and then make a motion?
Oh,
Relating to the motion
Sure.
to approve the minutes that are in the minutes. If an extra L could be found to go next to my last name, that would be great. And I move to accept the minutes.
If one N could be accepted from my name, that would be okay also.
That would balance it out very nicely. Any other comments about the minutes? All those in favor, raise your hand. Passes unanimously. The next section is our usual public comment section. Is there anyone from the public here this evening that would like to address the Comprehensive Plan Committee or make a comment about the comprehensive planning? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the next section. Let me start by saying we have a pretty full agenda tonight. You probably noticed if you've reviewed it. A lot has happened since June 17th, a little over a month ago when we met last. In regards to the inventory and analysis, people have been very busy, completed the review, having a couple of meetings on each one of the sections. The community survey's been completed. There was a focus group, many of you attended. There was a public input session at Lake Grove, and then a couple other things coming up. So we have quite a bit this evening, and we'll be looking for your thoughts and comments because many of you participated in these activities. So let's begin with the inventory and analysis section. As you reviewed it, you note that there's a list of comments that were made at the various subcommittee levels in regards to sections and actions that would have been taken by Barry Dunn. And I'll turn it over to Ally to review that.
Great. Just wanted to touch on a few points with that. John mentioned in your packet, we put together a table of committee comments that were made during subcommittee meetings as well as responses to those. And then in that same document outlined in red are places where we're still waiting on some additional information or additional data. And then also shared was a track changed version, so you can all see all of the edits that were made in that first version. And then for ease of reading, provided a clean version of that as well. I know the track changes can be hard to read through, but did want to show you all the changes that were made there.
And if you've gone through, you can see in those very comprehensive comments in what was suggested in those subcommittee meetings and what actions have been taken. Some of them, they're still waiting for some input from others to provide the information. Are there any further comments about the inventory and analysis subcommittee process, or the comments that have been listed and the actions taken. Everybody's good. Let me just remind folks that the next effort will be to get those that final information, final suggestions and edits. So by July 31st, by the end of the month here, then that will leave the opportunity for Barry Dunn to incorporate those and get them published and put up on the web page so the public can see all of it as well. Dana?
Yeah, I guess maybe it'd probably be a good thing just to discuss quickly the projected population change. I know that was a hot topic in all of the committee meetings, I think. And I just wonder, I think from, we got Barry Dunn's notes here, but I think at the last committee meeting, city staff was going to check in with the state economist, and I just wonder if that ever happened, and what did we learn there?
We didn't learn anything because we didn't do it. Part of that was, I'm not sure if you were at that meeting, Dana, or not, but we ended up getting some additional information from Ally as to how the economist numbers were arrived at. And I believe, and the mayor might be able to speak to this as well, there was a discrepancy, I think, with some of the data that was initially provided back in, I want to say March or April, with what the final report had. So the numbers were consistent at the end of the day with what we actually were presented, I guess, if I'm saying that right, Jeff?
Yeah, I think that's correct. So there was a gap. I think part of the confusion was that the state economist has a visualization tool on their website where you go and look at all this stuff. They came out with a new report, but there was some number of weeks, maybe a few months, where on the website it was still using the old data. So we got that straightened out, and recently, I guess maybe 2-3 weeks ago, they updated that with actually a new tool, so now the data is consistent. And I think fundamentally, and the staff can weigh in on this as well, but I think one of the big drivers, especially when you're looking at Androscoggin County and the way the economist is doing this, is the median age has a lot of weight in this. And so there was a big swing from the last projections when they updated that. As an example, Lewiston has one of the lowest median ages in the state. And that has an influence on this. So when you start looking at some of these things, it makes sense that the projected growth is now kind of flat for Auburn, and the decrease in Lewiston is now an increase. I think my own feeling about this at this point is we should take those numbers as they are. I don't think that as we move through the process that the committee should assume that that is what has to happen, right? That's their projection based on what's going on today, but I think that there's many things that we could talk about in the comprehensive plan that could alter that trajectory, and we could achieve some of the growth that I think everybody's looking for.
Does that help clarify that for you, Dana?
Yeah, I just wanted a little bit of a discussion. It makes sense. Thanks.
Yeah. And I suspect that part of the things that skewed the median age is Lewiston has a higher percentage of the population of the new Mariners. Much like my ancestry, French Canadian from Quebec, who had 10, 14 or 15 kids. My parents were in that group. I think that many of the new Mainers have fairly large families, and therefore younger children, which drops the median age somewhat more than Auburn has at this point.
I don't even know that we would have had the conversation if the economists had the same data that they used at the later on in this whole discussion.
Yeah. Jane?
Yeah, just a question about Lewis. This is back to like a you know, a sister city question. It might be a question for Bangor and Brewer as well, or Saco and Biddeford. Are they assuming that all of those younger people in whatever population segment are going to stay in Lewiston? I mean, that seems like an unreasonable assumption for, and maybe this is just to your point, Jeff, that we kind of take it all with a grain of salt, because I'm sure we all know that there's traffic back and forth in many neighborhoods, certainly in my neighborhood. And historically, I think that's what New Auburn was. It was the neighborhood in Auburn that people from Lewiston who worked in the mills came over to. At least that's what I heard when I moved there. So anyway, just the point being, I don't think Lewiston gets all that chunk of young folks.
Yeah, after they updated the tool, I looked at the sort of comparable cities that are service center communities throughout the state, and for the most part, they are all having the same pattern. They're flat, or they're decreasing in population over the period, and depending on how built out they are, like if you look in the Portland area, Scarborough has a really high projection of increased population because they have some room and there's a lot more development going on. Other places, they don't have the land available. So I think there's a lot of factors, and I think that they don't have a crystal ball. They're using their best effort and their best knowledge to try to give some projections, but that's what it is. It's not a sure thing, and there could be lots of factors that change this, just like when they updated this one, there was notable changes in their projections, and 2-3 years from now, there could be other changes.
Phil?
Yeah, I think Jay makes a good point. I think, this data probably is old, but, Washburn School was hitting around 74% mobility rate there at one point. Of that, like 45% were mobility rates from children from Lewiston to Auburn to Lewiston. So I think in specific neighborhoods, I think you're absolutely correct. I think we'll see that flow back and forth, but it is specific to certain neighborhoods.
Yeah, I think all these are good points, and we really need to use some of our own judgment in regards to how these communities interact, as well as from away, and recognize that the future is not totally clear all the time, and things that we don't expect sometimes happen. Adams.
I'm probably gilding the lily here. I'm just looking at the tool right now, and it has us at a very nominal population growth in the next 5 years. And I think there are certainly things that we can do in the comprehensive plan. There are policy things that can happen that can change that one way or the other.
Yes. Jeff?
Yeah, on just one other topic. So the draft housing study was circulated. There's more work they're doing, and I guess, are we expecting, Phil, that they'll have that complete that by the end of the month?
Yes, it should be. I think they're about 2 weeks out, 2-3 weeks out.
Okay. If Ally's looking for an end of the month sort of cutoff, we want to see if we can get that update in there.
Yep. Anything else on the current update on the inventory analysis?
I spent quite a bit of time reading this afternoon through the whole. It's kind of embarrassing to see how many times the committee expressed a desire for more of this and more of that, and how much of a burden has been put on the consultants and the staff. I don't know if it's unusual or not, but I did find as I went through it, there were a couple of areas that don't seem to be discussed. Maybe you will know that they're addressed on a day I wasn't here or in some subcommittee, but just the availability of medical care and services with 2 hospitals teetering on the edge of insolvency, the number of doctors that seem to be fleeing both communities, an ophthalmologist that recently was kind of forced out of practice when another company bought his practice. But he said when he came here years ago, 35 years ago, there were 9 ophthalmologists in this town. And he told me there are only 2 now. And a rheumatologist, I had a guy retire. Now I'm left with 30 and 60-day doctors who appear from who knows where. And a family doctor who's on the brink of retirement. So, and people are telling me you won't be able to find one. It's just that I don't know if that's something we can address, or maybe it's been addressed, or should be in the hands of other people. I don't know. My second one was the very low rating of Auburn schools receive in real estate sales websites. Zillow, Redfin, and what's the other one? Well, anyways, and how does this affect the willingness of people to live here and move here, especially professional people, when they see, very poor ratings? And I think we all suspect reasons that that's happening. Although I feel like immigrant populations, poor populations, are spreading to every part of the country, but our schools don't seem to be doing very well there. And there's nothing about law enforcement, growth in costs, calls per year, changes in types, severity of crimes, fire, rescue, that sort of thing. I don't know if that's as a part in a comprehensive plan. And I would also like to see something on what is our municipal tax burden compared to other similarly sized, cities in the state of Maine. So that's my.
Thank you for going through those in detail, Rex. Those are good observations, and will help inform our decision making.
Thanks, John. I hate to add another burden to the people.
Anything else on inventory and analysis? Allie?
Just close out, as John mentioned, all of this data will be put into version 3, and that full document will be shared online. But we're also going to put together an ArcGIS story map version of this that can put maps and text and data kind of in an easier to digest and read way, as opposed to going through a document and seeing maps separate from text and all of that. So hopefully, as that goes out to the community as well, that's a little bit easier and more digestible than, I think we're at close to 220 pages for the inventory. So trying to make something a little bit easier for the rest of the community to dive into as well.
Yeah, thank you for reminding us of that. If we really want people to look at it, we have to make it really accessible to them. Reading hundreds of pages is a challenge. If nothing else on inventory and analysis, let's go to the community survey that's been completed. We've got a broad cross-section of opinion from the community, and here's our opportunity to see what they told us. And Allie's going to walk through that.
So before I jump into that survey specifically, just want to give an overview, numbers-wise, for engagement of where we're at so far. So total inputs into the project, that's excluding just total number of visitors for the Social Pinpoint website, but across the website, surveys, focus group, and the first open house meeting, there have been over 1,200 inputs into the process so far. Looking at the website specifically, there have been close to 900 individual visitors to that website, and then I think we're at close to 70-something individual contributors on the website across the ideas wall, the map, and email signups. Dive into the survey in a second, but finished with 541 total survey responses, 285 middle school, 143 high school survey responses. Excluding committee members, city staff, and the consultant team, there were 77 attendees at the focus group and about a little over 30 attendees for the first open house at Lake Grove on Saturday.
Yeah, that's very impressive. I think we've gotten quite a bit of engagement here across a fairly broad cross-section of people.
So the full survey responses, all of the open-ended responses and everything were in the agenda packet for all of you to look at, as well as a bit of a more detailed summary than what I'm going to go into tonight, just in the interest of time. But looking at broadly who took the survey, as I mentioned, 541 total responses. Most of those, 478 of those responses were full-time residents. And of that total, 63 work, visit, or attend school in Auburn. As we talked about last time when I gave an overview, median age of respondents skewed slightly older, the largest bracket there being the 60 to 69 age bracket, with additional kind of higher levels of participation from the 40 to 59 and then the 70 to 79 age group as well. And then looking at income, again, similar to the update we gave last time, skews a little bit towards higher income, with the largest kind of income bracket being that $100,000 to $150,000 a year income, and then prefer not to respond, or the $50,000 to $75,000 being the next highest income brackets.
Allie, how do this and the previous slide, do you know off the top of your head how they compare with the actual demographics of Auburn? Like, how good were we at?
I can pull that together. Sorry, I believe you asked that last time, and I left that off for this, but we can pull that together for you.
Jeff?
Yeah, so I have some of the same questions, and I had several calls from residents about what's the information that's on these two slides. So this is going to be a real challenge to the committee, because when you look at this, what this is telling us is that the people that are engaging tend to be older and tend to have higher incomes. So the median family income is $66,000 in Auburn, right? So you look at this chart and you say, okay, we're getting the upper end of that. We look at the age and it's skewed towards the upper end. Now, this is not a surprising pattern to me. When you look at, if you run for election, you look at these wonky things, but if you look at voter turnout, this is the same type of pattern that you see. People tend to be more engaged in these civic processes. They tend to be older. They tend to have more income. But we need to keep thinking about this as we go forward, to somehow take into account that a huge chunk of the people that live in Auburn aren't engaged in this. And we should continue to look for strategies to do that, but it's difficult, right? We see this in lots of things in municipal government, to try to engage people in the lower half of the income and people of younger age. But I just bring that up because we're going to have to keep reminding ourselves of that, because we're getting a somewhat skewed view.
Yeah, Adam?
And I don't know what the numbers are Auburn-wide, but I know that in my district, which obviously is, not obviously, but is probably the poorest district in the city, that largest demographic group that responded comprises essentially 2% of the population of my district. So it's the smallest demographic percentage in my district, and appears to be the largest responding demographic in this survey.
Yeah. It's a good point. So as you take a look at this first question, who are the people that responded, and you have some information about that, that obviously reflects what their response to the questions were. So when you're reading the response to the questions, remember who's answering the questions. And also, I think we all know, some of it, as we were younger and working or knowing people, that lots of folks in Auburn and in most of our communities, particularly working age, are very busy people. working at least one job, maybe with overtime, maybe 2 jobs, raising families, perhaps having to attend to older family members and helping them out, so that their time is very limited, and it's much more challenging for them to participate in activities like this. That doesn't mean anything derogatory about them, is that they're doing first things first that they need to do for themselves and their family. Answering a survey or coming to a meeting is probably not the higher thing. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't be aware that they're there. We know that there are a number of folks who are at or below the poverty level in this community. So as we think about the future and think about the responses, let's remember to factor in the silent voices that aren't being heard as much as the folks who do participate. But we've tried to give them lots of different opportunities to do that, so. Becky, please.
How were the comments captured at the invitational focus group the other night? Because our table, folks at our table who work in the community with broad sections of the community spoke on behalf of their constituents and were pretty clear with some of their concerns and certainly their needs. So those were captured, correct, by the Barry Dunn staff person? But aren't yet in here anywhere?
There's a summary from the focus groups in the packet.
Right, that's right. Is there follow-up planned? I mean, some of those, I mean, we had some pretty pointed conversations at our table, some really specific, I would say critiques, not criticisms, but really healthy critique of groups in the community who feel disenfranchised, whose voice wasn't at the room, but the people who work with them were there, and saying pretty clearly what they needed, or would like, I guess.
Becky, why don't you look at that and reach out to Harry Dunn, and particularly the person who might have been taking the notes, and just see if they were adequately included.
Sorry, I'll reread this too. I went through it quickly, so let me read back there. But I mean, maybe there'll be some other times for conversations like that around specific topics where we want more information. But I mean, people didn't hold back that night.
Becky, I will say in your particular instance, if there are people that you feel like I could reach out to and sit down with a meeting in one-on-one or do a meeting in a box, I would love to do that or lead them that way. So if you had folks that maybe we can chat, sometime next week about how to reach those folks.
That would be great. I mean, it dovetails a little with some of the, like Rex's comments and a couple of other comments that it's hard to phrase it in the reverse, but it's not what's wrong with Auburn, but what aren't we doing that would be what people seem to think we should be doing or what they're looking for. So it's a hard question to ask someone what is the issue and what is their answer, or what are they, because they don't necessarily have the answer. They'll know it when they see it, and they don't see it, I think is the best way to phrase it.
Jeff?
I'd like to follow up on the comment about meeting in the box. So I think that's a really valuable tool. I don't know that we've used it much, but I think we need to be thinking about that, not that staff or the comp plan committee is going to have time to go around to all kinds of different constituent groups and run the meeting in the box, but the idea behind the tool is you can provide it to someone who'll help guide the conversation to get better input. So perhaps we should be thinking of various constituency groups that have their own meetings that we might be able to reach out to and suggest that they have a guided conversation using that tool so we can get more feedback, and perhaps some of the focus group people would be good contacts into those groups to facilitate that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to add that it might be useful I wasn't at Becky's table, I was at another table, but it might be useful just to see the unsummarized comments for some of these things, because they might be captured there, but not in the summary.
Okay, well, Becky?
And I mean, in Barry Dunn's defense, I think there were a lot of acronyms flying around and a lot of, if you lived here, you'd know this kind of conversation going on, and facilitating it, I was trying to keep it clear enough that your staff person could capture it. But I think the meeting in the box, Lauren, might be, and maybe with a couple of organizations that were specifically at the table I was working with.
And I will add, I think number 7 on our agenda, we can go around as a committee members who were there and kind of talk about what was discussed, just overview of what was discussed at your tables. I was going to talk about this a little later, but I'll mention it now. I've been thinking a lot about who isn't included in the survey, who wasn't included in the survey, and some more firm plans that we have for August. On August 6th, I'll be at the drop-in center for the day that they're there on Wednesday, doing a listening session with folks that are dropping in, and then with service providers after that. And then on August 8th, the 3 city interns for the summer from ELHS are helping me set up a youth forum as kind of their end of the summer project. And so hopefully that'll be a way that we can kind of capture that youth and invite parents as well to that, in combination with the new Mainer populations as well. And then on August 13th, there's the PAL Backpack Drive. And so I heard from Sean Boyd that somewhere from 300 to 400 families come through that drive. And so we'll be tabling at that event and thinking through ways in which to get feedback from those folks as well. And I will also add, it's beneficial for committee members to attend the engagement events like the focus group and the visioning session, so you can see who's there as well. As John mentioned, think about who is the person behind giving the comments at the meetings. But if you have more ideas of meetings in a box or things that we can set up with folks, and also it's not just the end of it's almost the beginning of our community engagement for this comp plan, I feel like. And so if we had some gaps in this during this summer sprint, we can address those in the fall and the winter as well before our plan is finalized. So, but those are the things that I have hopefully planned to fill in some of those gaps that the survey didn't fit or reach.
Good, thank you, Lauren. Thanks for the suggestions. Anything else? Before Ally continues.
All right. So we're going to walk through just some high-level results. Again, the full results are in your packets, and encourage you to sit with some of those inputs and data. So looking at what respondents valued most about Auburn, highest response there being the city's location in the region and in the state, the people and neighbors that live here, access to amenities and services, rural areas and agriculture, recreation opportunities, being some of the higher inputs that respondents valued the most. Looking at changes that would have the greatest impact on quality of life, lower cost of living was the highest response there, followed by more shops, restaurants, and entertainment amenities, improved walkability and pedestrian connectivity, better access to open space and trails, and then more housing options, including affordable housing, and options to downsize being included in that. Some of the highest rated changes that would have the greatest impact on respondents' quality of life. Looking ahead for respondents, thinking about how they might see their transportation needs changing over the next 10 years. Highest response there was that respondents would like increased public transportation options to access places outside of Lewiston and Auburn, followed by the ability to walk or bike to work services and amenities within Auburn. And similar question, but looking at how housing needs might be changing over the next 10 years. Again, looking at that population who did respond to the survey outside of not seeing housing needs change, smaller home or downsizing and transitioning to senior housing developments or assisted living options were the two highest selected responses, followed by a more affordable home than the current residence, or a larger home or dwelling to accommodate a growing family, adult children, or aging relatives.
So, Ellie, can I ask a quick question on that? What do you make of, so actually the largest number on that last graph is none of the above. What do you make of that?
So we've asked this question in a few different communities, and I'll say none of the above is typically the most common response that we see. I think what's unique here is that usually we don't see another option that's as close to none of the above as anything else is. And a smaller home and downsizing was a difference of 5 people between none and that. I think when we think about future planning for this, taking these in aggregate, that providing options for smaller homes or downsizing, transitioning to senior housing or assisted living taken together kind of indicates a larger need for some additional housing options to accommodate people aging in place. And then with some of the other options, I think looking in aggregate overall, more people selected that they did have some change. If you look at all the options combined, then no change.
Yeah, no, I get that. I just wonder what we're missing. If, you know, if people look at this and they say, none of that is me, what is it that we're missing?
And there's probably quite a few folks who are happy in the homes that they're in now, and don't see their housing needs changing over the next 10 years. They would want to stay in their current housing situation, is how we would interpret the response there.
This is an area that sparked some thinking about housing. As we know, the respondents are skewed towards an older generation here, who are often living in their own homes. So as those folks continue to age, they're saying that they're looking for some different options in their lives. But that also directly, I think, says something about another pathway and avenue for providing houses, homes for individuals who might be younger, who might be raising families, looking for those homes to become available. But if there's a bottleneck or barrier into finding the other kind of housing that seniors might now be looking for, that impedes a direct way to find some housing for folks. So it's, this sort of continuum of life is all intertwined, all interconnected here. And, you know, I've heard some people who were saying, you know, I'm older, I want to go someplace where it's not as big, people taking care of the lawns, I don't have to worry about it, and I can sell my house to someone else who needs a bigger house. So I think it's an interesting to look at what the second or third implications are of this. Any other questions, or Ally, you proceed?
Looking at some of those open-ended questions, similar to the middle and high school survey with those open-ended results, analyze this in a similar way. So looking at those responses, going through each of those, and then assigning tags or categories to those, and then doing some analysis in the end of those tags or those groupings together. On this slide, broke them out more into kind of positive things that contribute to quality of life, and then more negative things in that response. For this particular question, asked folks how they would rate their quality of life in Auburn, from 1 being poor to 5 being high. Average responses fell between 3 and 4. So looking at some of the why behind that number response, some common themes in the more positive ratings, again, location within the region and the state, the sense of community, general experience within the city, the amenities that Auburn has, availability of parks, nature, recreation, quality and availability of education, and then safety. And then similar thing for some of those more negative ratings, things contributing to kind of lower rankings for quality of life being the overall tax burden, quality of roads, general safety concerns, affordability, available amenities, general experience, quality and availability of education, and then availability of support for unhoused residents. And then looking at the last question, so asking respondents, what is your vision for the future? What are your hopes for the future of Auburn? Very broad themes were making Auburn more affordable and accessible for everybody, protecting natural and recreational resources, and then making Auburn more of a destination city, providing more amenities. Most common responses there being increasing affordability of the city overall, improving and maintaining infrastructure, increasing parks and recreation opportunities, increasing development opportunities, and then won't read through all of these, but improving quality and accessibility of education overall as well. As far as kind of a high-level summary, those were some of the key themes that came out of that. Again, there's a more detailed summary as well as all of those responses, and then I will work to send something to Lauren tomorrow comparing demographics of survey respondents to the demographics of the city.
Any other thoughts about that data?
Are there any surprises?
I think it's, oh, I'm sorry. Becky?
When you asked if there were any
I know.
surprises, do you often find committees get surprised by the survey?
Sometimes.
They do?
That's why I ask, yeah.
That's interesting.
I think there's different situations or different topics that committee members might be more plugged into than others. So when you see something you may not be as familiar with, that could be.
Dana?
I think one thing that is always a little surprising to me is to see something like this, a similar number of people who put the quality of our roads and then also the tax burden as negative things. Like that, it's just competing. Obviously, it doesn't make sense to have both of those be, but anyway.
I don't find that a bit surprising.
Oh, fair enough.
Dennis?
Go ahead.
Open.
Well, I was just going to make a similar observation. The number one the desire here is increasing affordability, and the next 5 things down the list are things that require some cash. So I don't know how we're going to thread the needle at the end of this, but it's going to be a double backflip, I think.
That genie.
Get the genie back. Yeah. Yeah.
I want to, like, circling back to the demographic question, if we are so misaligned in our demographics and skewed higher in terms of income, for example, number one in that group is increasing affordability. This is a major problem for Auburn that I think we have to look at, right? Because we're only sampling the high end of our population, and we're getting this result.
Yeah. That's a good observation. And I think even folks with some higher income probably have to look at their budgets pretty closely as well.
So I guess the question I have, Ally, is what do you see elsewhere? Because I found the increasing affordability and lowering the tax burden in a 2-to-1 ratio remarkable. What that says to me is these affordability questions are beyond the municipality and funding the municipal services. And I think part of this might be just the moment we're in because things are very expensive, but what's your experience been in the past with some of these prior surveys with similar questions asked, and did you get kind of a similar response or different?
Yeah, I think overall affordability, particularly in some of our more recent projects, and tax burden tend to be kind of the highest responses for kind of what folks are looking for. And when we get to future land use, can provide some research and thoughts on kind of land use planning and fiscal capacity and planning for improved fiscal capacity. But I think in almost every community that we've worked in, affordability and tax burden have been the highest things on people's minds.
So since the tax burden is really the municipal tool, have other communities come up with strategies around affordability outside of the tax burden?
Indirectly, yes. So looking at things like infill development, not expanding infrastructure costs while still increasing the tax base, strategies like that to get a little bit more at kind of spreading out kind of overall responsibility for the same infrastructure that exists. Being one of the larger strategies. There's some more things that can go into that, but that's kind of the larger strategy that we've seen as a way to get at some of that.
Okay.
Just return to one of the things. One of the things I brought up earlier. Could we get a tax burden comparison? Is that something that?
Yeah, I made a note of that, and the city manager and I actually have this for the Mayor's Coalition cities, but this is something we can get quite easily for the next meeting.
When you asked your question about affordability, I thought you were actually asking about, things like the cost of groceries and the cost of gas and heating fuel, and which the city of Auburn has virtually no ability to control, but isn't that part of what you're asking there, is that you're talking about oranges and apples, right? Kinda.
Yeah, I think so, exactly, Jane. Because the affordability of the municipal services is by and large tied to the property tax levy, and that's the tax burden here. But there's a 2-to-1 ratio to affordability, and that was my question. Things are super expensive for people, but I don't know that the municipality can influence a lot of that. That's why I was asking, did people come up with some creative ideas around that elsewhere?
I mean, this is maybe overly simplistic, but having better jobs makes stuff more affordable, right? So, but I mean, I guess that would be a question for you, whether municipalities that have higher median incomes, is affordability still on people's minds, even if they're making $30,000 more, per household than they are in Auburn?
I have one community that we've worked in that is much more higher of an income. The rest have been pretty comparable to Auburn, but even their kind of cost of services was high up there as well, kind of taxes, those types of things, but not cost of living from the sense of like housing is expensive, groceries are expensive, didn't come up as much as just general tax burden, residential tax.
Adam?
So I think there are places where a survey like this doesn't touch on the places where there's actual impact for the policy making or for the comprehensive planning. But I take in Allie's answer, there is like one big space where the Venn diagram of municipal policy and affordability overlaps, and that's with respect to housing. And so I think that for our purposes in comprehensive planning, our focus on affordability should be focused on how do we do a comprehensive plan that allows for more affordability.
And of course, I think Jane's point is well taken in that one of the ways you help individuals who feel cost burdened is to have more opportunities for them to make a bigger salary, more income. A lot of issues are resolved by having financial resources to address them. And so what the city can do is continue to say, how do we grow the community in a way that it provides job opportunities that provide higher incomes? Now, we can't always pick the one we want, but we could have that in our mind as a goal to try to achieve. Or in our comprehensive plan, we might want to speak to that. Phil?
Ellie, I'm just wondering if, Lauren talked about that next step of engagement this fall when there's that opportunity. When I reviewed this, I started writing out some notes regarding how do you drill this in a little bit more in some of our discussions. So even though they may not have been one that filled out the survey, we can understand that they may have some similar responses. So now how do we get to the affordability piece? If we're having future focus discussions, engagement opportunities in the box kind of meetings, if we had that list of things that's great dialogue that's in here to say, how do you work these into that conversation so that we get more information about what does affordability mean for you in Auburn, then that might help us drill into this a little bit more. Because I think these are great topic areas that we have, but we may not know the intent of why somebody marked increasing affordability. I know why I marked it, but I'm not sure if it's similar to everyone else, but we might get more information if we can do that.
Absolutely. I think we can work on strategies to drill a little bit deeper with that. And in particular, plugging tomorrow night's open house activity. I think that would be a great question that we could potentially look to ask is, what does affordability mean to you? Lauren, don't want to throw something at you again last minute, but we can look to put something together to dig into that question a little bit deeper. And then as you're looking through these responses, we're doing some initial input and visioning to have those inputs into the vision statement in August, but we'll spend months after digging deeper into these issues and looking at those strategies that are acceptable to the broader community of how do we increase affordability, how do we accommodate a lot of these different topics, and having some more community-based conversations around those particular strategies as well.
Yes?
Yeah, I would just observe there does seem to be confusion around this affordability thing, and I think that's 2 or 3 slides earlier than that, affordability and tax burden shift. And, you know, so putting finer points on that is a good thought.
Just to maybe give historical perspective here. Since I've been serving in public service since 1977, a little while ago, these issues of taxes and services and burdens on individuals are exactly the same conversations. Because the underlying causes of it haven't changed dramatically. Now, those of you who weren't here back in those days, in the 70s and 80s and 90s, you might remember there was a very popularity of tax caps running across the state in all kinds of communities, where referendums were put out to the public to put some kind of cap on how much the municipality could raise in taxes. In fact, the legislature did the same thing. It didn't work out too well for them, but they made a stab at it. But here's my point. It happened that at that time I was being hired as a consultant, probably in 24 communities around this state, to work for municipalities that were facing that question on a ballot that would say you can't raise taxes more than 1% or 2% across the state. In working with those communities, I structured the question to say, if the cap was put on, here would be the consequences of what you would lose in services. Not scare tactic, just mathematics. You only have this much amount of money. This is how far it goes. So certain things in your community are not going to be provided the way they were in the services. In those 22 communities, when it went out to a vote, and they were asked to make a choice between the tax cap and reducing their services, all 22 communities said we didn't want the tax cap. Now, maybe that was because of my brilliance in consulting with them, I don't know. But I think it was a reaction to people, that when you say, you want an ambulance to show up if you're not feeling well, somebody in your family needs it, if you need public service, safety, or fire, you want your roads plowed, folks say, we want those things. We need them. But they also say, geez, I struggle to pay the bill. So neither one of them are mutually exclusive. It's a dichotomy which is very difficult, but simply saying that the tax burden is too high, we all would want to pay less. But when you have to make the actual choice, their choice in many cases are, as long as you're being as responsible as you can be at the local level, we are, want you to provide as much of those services as you possibly can at the best price to do it. So that's just historically that I've lived through this from 1977. And this is sort of how this breaks down when I've worked with a couple dozen communities on this specific question. Anyways, a little history that you can take with you or throw away, whatever you'd like to do with it. Anything else on the community survey? Oh, I'm sorry. Jane.
I've sort of got the affordability thing on the brain, and I was thinking about your point, Adam, about the Venn diagram. I mean, I think the question of what affordability means to people is really huge, and I'm just sitting here thinking about childcare, and also Matt was, transportation, and there may be others as well, but I mean, is childcare an issue that comes up in somewhere? I may have missed it in my fast reading, but that, is childcare affordable? How does it compare the expense and availability in Auburn relative to other places?
Jeff?
Well, Jay Brenchak, who's in our economic development, has done lots of great work with our manufacturing sector. And childcare is one of the three things they all mention, right? They need availability of workers, they need housing for the workers, and they need childcare. And it's not, I don't think it's just affordability, it's availability as well. And I've gone around to a few of the childcare places to ask some questions about this, and pretty much what they say is there's a point of no return, right? Where it's not worth working because you're working to keep your kid in childcare, and they all have this very similar plateau of what the price is and the difficulty of providing staffing to have those services. But it comes up all the time, especially relative to economic development and supporting job growth.
Yeah. Adam?
I mean, I'd say it's a statewide emergency, and there's several state legislative initiatives. The one thing to take away, we've gotten some data back that actually Lewiston Auburn, relative to the rest of the state, it's still an emergency, it's still terrible, but proportionally we're better situated in the ability to provide childcare than the rest of the state is, both south and north of us. So, good.
I think it goes back to what Matt was saying regarding demographics, though, in our numbers, right? So, I mean, I think it only scored like 28 on one of those sections, so for childcare. But if we have an older population, then that's not their issue. And so I think it does tie to those demographics.
Yeah. Any other comments? That should bring us to the focus group event that we had at Edward Little High School. Many of you participated. Thank you for doing that. I think it was very helpful to have you there and have you hear what was being said. So maybe why don't I start with, since there were a number of you there, what are your thoughts about the focus group? How did you think the event went? How did you think the usefulness of the discussions were? Anything you took away from that focus group, Jeff?
So I'll jump into this. So in the couple days after that, I ran into about a half a dozen people that participated that were not at the table I was at. All very, very positive comments. Everybody commented they thought it was a great event. It was very useful. They thought the productive conversations, very well run. There was a great turnout. So personally, I think it was really valuable. And we'll see how the public visioning goes, but it seems like that's a really good strategy. And there were a lot of people that I saw there that would never show up to the public event because they don't view themselves necessarily as giving public input, but their business or their organization is an integral part of the community, and I think it gets us input that would be missed otherwise.
Becky?
I would agree with that. I thought it was a really well-designed and curated group of people. Whoever did that, I thought it was well done. And I think we need more of that, because it is those missing voices that are going to create this tapestry we're trying to put together. So I talked about my table already a little bit. Number one, most of the folks weren't from this community. And number two, they have strong opinions about where they live, and they were trying to compare some of their experiences to what Auburn should do through a lens. But what cut through it all was one person who had very strong opinions, and while she didn't dominate the conversation, people wanted to hear more of what she had to say. And it was very much it was less about the content and more about I've been here 20 years, we've had these conversations. I want to see something happen. So a weariness, but an excitement. This kind of juxtaposition kept jump back and forth. And so facilitating it was a little complicated because there was something there. And I'm going to read comment number 41 because I think it hits where we are. Auburn is this person, number 41 response says, Auburn is an affordable place to live, which is why we moved here. So they're not concerned about affordability. However, it is purely just a place where we live and not a place where we are part of a community. Almost everything we do, work, entertainment, dining, is done outside of Auburn. We commute to Brunswick, Portland, or Freeport for almost anything that isn't basic necessities, like grocery shopping or hardware. And then they say they do regularly enjoy the public trail at Lake Auburn and Mount Appetite. I've lived here 45 years. That wasn't always the case. There were people who this was their home core, right? This was the area where they found their full life. And then I think affordability has changed to the folks who can afford to go and get what they want elsewhere go, leaving behind a segment of our community that, for whatever reason, can't leave or doesn't leave or chooses not to leave. And now we're trying to knit those two together. And I don't know how a comprehensive plan does that. I'm not sure this maybe is the forum to do it, but this community is hungry to figure that out, is what I took away from my table.
Good comment. Dana?
Yeah, sure. So it was a very impressive night, and every time I looked to a different table, I said, this is a great group of people, and I want to be a part of this conversation. So I'd say the one thing that I would maybe change or do differently if we did it again was maybe to not have so many things going on at once, because, I had a great conversation at my table, but I bet there were 10 other ones that were just as good, which only speaks to how great the event was. And it was just really impressive to see so many people there from so many different backgrounds and expertise. So it was really good.
Other comments? Matt?
Yeah, I agree. I thought it was a great event. And just, I want to echo something that I think Becky was talking about. My table, people there were really interested in being able to better make connections within the community. So, yeah.
Anyone else who was there have comments? Phil.
I always look for opportunities to praise staff, so I think Lauren did an excellent job of the legwork that was necessary to bring those people together. That's what created the great dynamic of the conversation. So huge kudos to Lauren on that. Especially being someone new to the community, but still finding an opportunity to say, hey, let me get you there, and let's talk about why it's important that your voice is there. So it was really great.
Yeah. I would just add my voice as well, that I heard very positive comments from people. The conversations were constructive, civil, thoughtful, informative. I learned some things I didn't know, which always makes it a good day for me. I learned something. So I thought it was very successful, and you stole my words from me, Phil, because I really did want to congratulate the staff, particularly coordinated by Lauren. But support from Barry Dunn and the staff, and putting all of this together, getting everybody there, getting it all organized, getting the right mix of people, having it set up is no small task. And so you guys did a good job by hiring Lauren. Don't you let her go. So you don't need to be embarrassed by that. You did a good job.
I'm going to run out of here in like 2 seconds. I'm curious if we have time to just get into some detail of the conversations that were at the tables, because this might be our opportunity for committee members to share about just maybe high level or detailed discussion, although I do love the compliments. But let's maybe just take a few minutes to share back to other committee members about what was talked about, to Dana's point that you couldn't sit at every table. So we can just go around if you were, as in a circle, if you were there and want to share.
Mine's ironically coming from Dana's table, but so also to what Becky was saying, it is tough and weary making to hear conversations that you've heard for 20 years being repeated at some of these tables. And that was definitely one thing that I took away, was the discussion of transportation as related to economic development, as related to keeping young professionals here. And we had at our table someone who is from the manager program, who's come from elsewhere, is living here, but is talking about all the other folks who come through their manager program don't live here. They live in Portland and do not do anything here except work here. And she, I think, very articulately tied to transportation and to how economic development is connected to downtown development, which is also tied to transportation, and how that draws people here because they want to live in a city. And I think there's several of the comments also touched on that Auburn feels like a suburb to them, a place where they can only get their necessities, but not a place where they can go out at night or have it as a walkable space. And I really, it's tough because we were having that conversation back when I was a young professional. And that's still something that we need to talk about. And I'm really hoping that the comprehensive plan can focus on that.
I heard our table was housing and development, one of the two tables. And one of the people there was an executive at a utility company, and who made it clear that one of the things they need for their employees is that they need to have them in the community. It was natural gas utility, because they need to be here if something happens, to go and attend to it right away. And they're having a hard time finding workforce housing for folks so they can live here. It was also commented that we need housing of all types, from the person who doesn't have shelter to the person who's looking for much more upscale, luxurious housing because they have plenty of income and that they want to have a nice place to live in. And often they don't find it here and they live in a different community. That detracts from the community when all folks can't find a place to live here so they can participate here. Which maybe gets to some of the things that you're talking about, is if you want businesses that has entertainment or leisure activities, they need customers. And if they leave town and they go someplace else, you're losing the customer base that people are looking for. So that was interesting at our table as well. And we happened to have Jay Brenchek there, and he spoke about the things that the community is doing to hook the workforce up to go past the barriers, transportation, language skills, housing availability. And they've been able to put 150 people who were not connected to manufacturing into those positions, and the manufacturers are delighted. And so when we talk about how do we be creative, particularly when we're dealing with the private capitalist economy, there are still some ways that local government can be effective and improve it. So that was, I found those things interesting when I was at my table. Dennis?
So I was at the table that was retail and hospitality, and Dennis was at that table. We only had 2 folks at that table. And they were interesting in terms of employment and housing. One of them was running an aviation instruction school out at the airport. That part of the city is doing great, according to this individual. His workforce are people that are on track to become commercial pilots and are earning $200,000 to $300,000 a year. So housing for them is not a problem. They come from all over the country and locate at some of our higher-end residential rental units. The other person was the manager of a retail chain store who was limited in the people that she could hire because at their salary levels, their hourly rates are low enough where people do not travel from outside to come work for them. So she feels like she's limited to a workforce that is local. And Dennis, have you anything else on that?
That's an impressive summary. Actually, I think you did a really good job. I would just say, I think from the individual that was running the pilot school, I think the other comment was move more of the amenities from the downtown or to exit 75. There needs to be more development, more investment, and bringing some of those, I guess, entertainment and other options out towards exit 75. I'd say that was the general theme, but affordability around housing, I think, came for the retail individual and just the ability to recruit employment and that housing complication of being able to afford at that rate what they pay in this area is challenging.
Rex?
Tim Cowan and I did the education and youth. I believe that was the title of it, Youth and Education. And it was just amazing, a good group of people, a large group of people at that table. And they, so well-intentioned, such good hearts, such good people. And it was just sad to hear that almost uniformly, everyone is already working under cuts in funding, in positions. And I just dread to think what the future holds for, I just went away sad about the whole thing. The tremendous needs that are out there. One of the fellows was a parole officer, and he just had dilemma after dilemma, and more children to serve. But it was just sad to think about the future, that we're going to have more cuts like this, and how these groups are going to be able to respond.
Any other reflections, Jane?
Yeah, I was at the Environment and Natural Resources, and I guess there were three things that came up. I mean, there were people from Maine Extension, the Androscoggin Sagadahoc cooperative group, and then somebody who's been affiliated with the Land Trust, and also the Taylor Pond Association. Three things came up. One was the great threats, like, okay, well, what are the threats that are facing Auburn's natural environment? And the first thing that came up was devastating rain events. I mean, and of course we've been experiencing a lot of those. And so it has to do with impacts on the lake and erosion of soil and, around Taylor Pond or something. I mean, just like lots of impacts on property. The other thing we talked about a lot was garbage and trash and refuse, and kind of how that impacts the pleasantness of the community. I mean, we're talking a lot about pedestrian, a more walkable Auburn, but there was some, sort of lamenting of the state of just trash and litter. And then I think along with that, there was a desire to find a way for groups within the community to work together better and not duplicate efforts, which seems to happen a lot. And then there was also just, anytime you start talking about these monumental issues like climate change, it's like, well, what can we do at the local level? Which I understand where people are coming from, but there are things that we can do.
Further reflections from committee members? Ally or Lauren, any further reflections from you? It was a great event, successful. I was pleased. That brings us to the July 19th public input meeting at Lake Grove. Some of us were there. I think maybe this might be, maybe you could just say how many people you think were there, and your thoughts of it, and we'll ask folks that were there what their reflections were.
Yeah, I would say when we were planning this event, for a Saturday in July, of course we were a little nervous about the turnout. And the goal was to have a beautiful Saturday so that we could maybe attract some folks that were already going to be at the park, which I think we did scoop a couple of couples that came over and gave input. It was great to see some young children. Natalie did an amazing job having a children's station. And so from my perspective, I think about 30 people, many of them I didn't recognize from, previous events or whatever. I'm sure you guys recognize them, but I think that's a good turnout for an open house on a Saturday in July. So I would say pretty good. And we had great live music, and I think people seem to be, giving their feedback and happy to be giving their feedback, which is important, and hopefully they'll spread through word of mouth. So I would say overall, good.
That was very great to see one of the city staff in the IT department, who plays a great guitar and is a good singer, volunteered to be there for the whole event.
I traded him sourdough bread for his. It was a good trade. Well, I got the better.
So that was nice to see a number of folks contributing to make this, and a number of folks from Barry Dunn were there, so that was useful as well. Dana, I know you were there. Did you want to have reflections on it? Or?
Yeah, I had some pretty good discussions with a variety of people. Actually, quite a few people in the room, actually. But there were a lot of good resident some people discussed like the ag zone. That was a topic of conversation on a lot of the tables that people were asked to write down some thoughts about, as well as city parks. And I think we had the chair of the Parks and Rec Advisory Board show, and she was she's always so proud of that park. It's really good to see people using it, and the good work that the city staff has done to improve that park. That was definitely noted there, and it was just a great use of, I think, a great place to have that meeting in general. It's awesome to see, that thing go to good use for sure.
Becky, were you there for a while? No? Yeah.
I was, just briefly. I think my biggest takeaway was just seeing the park activated. I mean, it's, I think for those of us who've been here a long time, it was just, so quiet for so long, and to just see people multi-generational using it. I know that wasn't the purpose of the day, but I thought it was a great backdrop. I talked to two people, and they were people I've known for a long time, so I didn't really gain any new information, but they were appreciative to be there, putting their buttons in the cup, and I thought it was great. I did have a great conversation with some of the other staff folks from Barry Dunn, which was helpful in terms of getting to know them and methodology and such, so it was good.
Yeah,
And Lauren has a great dog.
Yeah. I ran into a couple of folks from Auburn who had never been there. We can't keep hiding these wonderful assets that we have from people in our own community. They need to know about them. David?
That comment, I talked to 3 individuals, with others that weren't from Auburn, encouraged them to participate at our table anyway, but they were there because of the park. They were also looking for other green space. We, sent them over to the spring trail because they were looking for some type of recreational amenity. So we have things in this community that other people are looking for in other communities. One person said they can't go to the park in their community, and I don't know if they're referring to Auburn or not, but because it has trash and needles and other challenges like that, and they always come to Lake Grove. So I was totally blown away. I mean, I've been in this area for 25 years, and I had no idea how popular that park was. So the city should be proud to have an amenity like that available.
It's got a great playground facility there too. It's wonderful. So let's promote it more. Everybody should know about that park. And any other reflections of people that were there? Jeff?
So, and more to come for the park, right? There's additional plans. I can't remember what phase we're in, but it is very popular. I had a couple lengthy conversations with people, one about sustainability and recycling, and another one more about land use, all sort of tied to the comp plan, but not directly what we were talking about at the tables. They went and did their table thing, and then they were having these other conversations. So I thought it was good. It's a good way to capture people that you're not, their ideas and thoughts that you're not going to get otherwise.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was on a weekend, and it was a fun thing, and the people who had kids felt they could come and bring their kids with them. Otherwise, they may not have come at all. So.
I will add, I had a really good conversation with a younger person. They were probably in high school, if I had to guess, about what the city was doing about climate change and resilience and so on. So that was a good lead into our next, or one agenda item. Yeah, no, but they're thinking about, people in the city, the community are thinking about it. So it was interesting to chat with him about like bikeability and so on. And, that was great to add that.
Any other reflections, comments?
John, I think what we're going to do too is a number of people expressed they wanted more time to think about the questions that were being presented that day, like these deep thoughts. I want to contribute more. So what we're going to end up doing is after these focus groups here, visioning sessions, we'll end up putting them all online, and Lauren will do another blast out to people, like, in case you missed it, or you were there and you want to spend more time to reflect on that, here's your opportunity to do that.
Oh, good. Yeah, reach out some more. That's great. Okay. There's nothing other on the first meetup.
I
input.
will add to, sorry, John, to interrupt you, but I was tabling at the farmer's market on Sunday as well for the comprehensive plan. So got some feedback from those folks. I don't know if the committee was aware that we were doing that. So feedback was there for about 3 hours, and got a range of views from folks. So wanted to mention that before I forgot.
Good. Number 9 is an update on where we are in the process and what's next.
All right.
And I think that's you, Ellie.
Yes. So we're about kind of almost through phase 1 and phase 2. So wanted to just quickly reorient the committee to where we are in the process, so what we've been doing, and then how all of that feeds into the rest of the project. So phase 1 with the inventory, and 2 with that initial public engagement and visioning, knowing that there will be engagement in subsequent phases as well. But both of those phases still on schedule to wrap those up at kind of the August meeting next month, going through a workshop next month to put together a draft version of the vision statement, and then kind of revisiting that in subsequent meetings as well. But transitioning into more of that action plan and final plan development. So all of the work that the committee has done, that city staff have been doing, are going into that vision statement. So all of the community input, recent plan, and inventory data will all be used to inform the creation of that vision statement. And then that vision statement, and we'll touch a little bit on kind of what that looks like as well, but that vision statement becomes the overarching vision for the plan over the next decade. Underneath that potential vision, depending on the structure that the committee chooses, can have some specific goals or priorities. And then underneath that, all of the inputs that have been developed will go into policies and actions, future land use map, look to incorporate those state requirements, and then creating that implementation plan. So input from the community, all of the inventory data will be the data points that go into future phases of this project. So as we look at that, again, looking at community priorities, what we've heard from the community, and then supplementing that with any data, knowing that if there's something that's going into the plan that really wasn't a priority that came up for the community, would like to have data that comes out of the inventory or solid reasoning for why that's going into the plan as well. So over the course of September through around early summer next year, we'll be really spending time building out that action plan. So how are we going to implement the community's vision? What is that future land use map going to look like? And then at the end of the day, I think it's been mentioned a few times, how is that plan going to be implemented over the next 10 years? And spending some time in late spring next year building out that implementation strategy and that implementation plan as well.
Okay, good. That gives us a sense of where we are and what's ahead of us. That kind of was a segue into the visioning statement. Were there further comments on the visioning statement? I'm sorry, Daniel.
Yeah, one thing I just wanted to bring up. So we have 2 more community meetings this tomorrow and then a week from tomorrow. I've noticed on the way over here, it just occurred to me that the advertisements that I've seen for those meetings have been they seem like they're mostly focused on the one that we just had over the weekend. And a lot of those advertisements, I've noticed that the other 2 dates are on them, but I don't know that I've noticed any specific targeted advertising for like tomorrow's event or maybe the next week's. And we have a little bit of time. It would be great if we could push out some information maybe tomorrow morning, just to get some people more aware of what's going on.
Yep. That's a good point, Dana. So you have some examples in your packet on visioning statements, what other communities have done, how they've structured them, and that's some work ahead of us.
So the information that is in your packet is just a refresher on what we talked about last month. Again, just want to prime everybody before we go into that workshop. After all of this engagement, we'll compile all of that into a very large document and some summary information for all of you to look through ahead of that workshop, and we'll send along some guiding questions that I'm going to walk through with this as well. So as you're looking through all of that information, having some guiding questions or thoughts as you're looking through that to think about what to pull out. But again, vision statement is the broad direction for this plan over the next 10 years. Focuses on shared community values, illustrates Auburn's sense of identity, and depicts that desired future condition, so both physical, environmental, and social attributes, and then overall sets direction for the plan, but also sets the structure for what that plan looks like. The state has required subject matter that needs to be in the plan, but in terms of how that's structured, they don't have a preference. We've put together plans that are based on kind of chapter layout, similar to how the city's last plan was, but have also put together some plans that are more structured around those goals and priorities specifically that are part of that vision statement, and weave in some of those state requirements into different topic areas as well. So again, projecting out over the course of this plan for about 10 years, and then it's general enough to capture the community's strategic direction, but not specific achievements that can be met and then discarded. That's more of what those policies, strategies, actions, whatever we end up calling those, look like, or those specific actions or achievements will be. So again, provided some examples of what those look like and some links for those. Again, Ellsworth was structured more around guiding principles, so their plan had 9 sections structured around each of those 9 principles. Plano, Texas was similar to that. Bangor's vision statement was more narrative in nature. And then Charlotte, similar to previous examples, had some key community values, so equitability, authenticity, integrated, and resilient as key themes throughout that plan. And then different goals underneath that their policies and strategies related to. And then just another example here of how the vision statement can set the direction for what the structure of the plan looks like. And we've had some conversations tonight as well as throughout this process that a lot of these areas are interrelated. And so how do we structure a plan that addresses that a lot of these topics transcend one specific bucket or another? So is that bringing those up to a higher level and restructuring some of those topic areas into underneath different goals, but wanted to provide a graphic here from Portsmouth, New Hampshire that gets at a little bit of that. And then this piece is new, and we'll share this with you ahead of time, but as we dig into next month, we'll spend some time having this group go through some individual brainstorming, some larger group discussions, larger small group discussions, and then larger group, full group discussions to start grouping some of those themes and some of those ideas together. So looking at values and priorities. So values are those deeply held beliefs of what is important to the community. Those don't really change a lot over time. And then priorities are the condition as kind of looking at kind of how you go about implementing those values. So priorities can change over time, but values typically don't. I think an example of this is I value my health. My priority that I'm focusing on is going to the gym. That's something that can change over time, but prioritizing my health over time doesn't change. The strategies that I use to do that might. And then looking at that broader vision, you're going through that engagement, thinking about what characteristics in 10 years best describe Auburn. What should the community look like? What does it feel like? How are people getting around? How are they involved? How are they interacting with each other? And what does it feel like to live in Auburn and be a part of that community? Is there strong volunteerism? Is there access to jobs or a variety of housing types? Is it safe to get around, whether you're walking or biking or driving? All of those types of things. So just wanted to give some broad guidance of what we'll be looking at next time. But we'll share these as you're going through the rest of that engagement to start thinking through some of these broader areas for discussion next month when we look at building out that vision statement, and all of you have that time and that group discussion to start pulling that together. I think we'll look at individual kind of sticky note activities, larger small group discussions and big group discussions. I think with a group this big, it can be very hard for me to stand up at a whiteboard and we just change the words around. So we'll pull all of those ideas and start grouping themes and things like that into a broader structure, and start thinking about what that vision looks like. I think we can take all of that information and put together a draft for everybody to respond to, and we can do some more of that specific wordsmithing or anything like that at the September meeting once you have something to react to as well. Are there any questions on that? I know I breezed through that, but.
No, that was useful, and over the next month, if you can find some time to take a look at that and maybe think about initially some of your thoughts in regards to the visions that you can bring with you in August. Are there any questions that you have about the visioning portion of this exercise? Yep, okay. Now, in section 11, there have been quite a bit of conversation in a number of the subcommittees in regards to looking at the issue of climate change and resiliency, and how we may want to include that in some form. Allie's provided in your packet some 4 examples on how other communities have done that, a little different perspective. What we need to do tonight is have some guidance in regards to that issue. Number one, is this something that the committee feels should be included in some format in our comprehensive plan? And then secondly, what would your thoughts be on what the format might be, having looked at some of the examples? Adam?
I say yes, and I really, really like the way that Ellsworth did it, because it is focused largely on the resilience side of this and the preparation for the storm impacts that we were just talking about. And I mean, they sort of comprehensively cover each of the issues that might be affected by the changing climate. They don't attribute it to human action or engage in any of the politics of this, but talk about how you prepare your city for a changing climate and build it to be more resilient and to strengthen infrastructure. And so I really like their approach, and I also think, just from what I know of how Auburn has to approach these issues, they're very similar to the ones that Ellsworth has already addressed. So I think that's a really good starting point for us.
Others' reaction to
I
including?
think it'd be great to, I think it needs to be included in some fashion, whether it's a standalone section or whether it's highlighted within the other sections. I don't know what the best approach to that will be. I was really struck in reading through the materials for tonight, how it came up in many different conversations at the, Edward Little event, and then in other, it seems to be on people's minds, right? So whether it's business or agriculture or I don't know, downtown neighborhoods or whatever. So my one, and I've shared some of this with Lauren already, because for each of the sections we've worked through an inventory of information, and I think it would be really helpful to have some kind of data available that's relevant for thinking about climate impacts in Auburn. And I had suggested, I'd made some suggestions, I drew on Matt's expertise on this, and there are people in the community who would help you get that. But just, temperature, flooding, economic impacts of flooding events. There were other things that came to mind as well, but that would just help to, just as we have with all the other sections, to kind of provide some baseline information.
Dana?
Yeah, so I think that to address climate change, I think what I would probably recommend doing is we're going to have a section on the natural resources, and I believe inside of that we should discuss, the effects of climate change and how we plan to react to them inside of that section. But also, I'm an IT guy, and so I think of disaster recovery, emergency preparedness, and those types of things should probably be inside of the city services as well as infrastructure sections. So I think regardless of whether or not you have a separate section that discusses climate change in depth, I think you have to touch on it in a lot of different places. So I think it's something that every time we go through a different section, we should at least consider whether or not climate change has an impact in the section that we're working on.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, Dana. I think it's sort of like equity, right? You have to weave it through every part of what's going on here. And I like Adam and Jane, and I think Dana, I fully support including it in the comprehensive plan.
Yeah. Rex?
I just kind of missed something about where or how I found the examples of the other towns. Are those active links? Two of them are, two of them aren't? I must have found the two that aren't.
The really good one is.
Sorry.
I try clicking on that and I just get CPC meeting packet.
The different reactions depending on different computers, I think, and where you're at. Oh, Phil.
And just to tie to what Dana was just referring to, I think next quarter, so our directors all have quarterly goals that they work on, but next quarter, two of the goals that really tie in, I think, with what Dana was just referring to is one, to establish a strategy for providing local emergency management services to include emergency plan updates, preparedness and recovery drills, and training and integration with county, state, EMA organizations. And then the second one is to update our City of Auburn emergency action plan. We updated that just about the 3 weeks into COVID, I think. And so doing that plan and doing that again. But I love the idea of making sure we're incorporating that in, because as these disasters take place and incidents occur as well, making sure that we're having an updated plan to be able to respond is critical.
Yeah, I think quite important. I would add my voice that I think having some sort of climate change and resiliency is probably necessary in today's world in our planning. And I think we all can remember back to the ice storm and the kind of challenge that provided in the community. And more recently, any of you gone down Stetson Road lately? There's a little break in the road there. And just go up the little stream a ways in East Auburn, another break. So these are not rare and occasional challenges in the community, need to be planned for. Anybody disagree that we shouldn't have a climate change resilience? We're all in agreement with that? Okay. You have some guidance and direction?
I think we can revisit this again when we build out that vision and kind of start thinking about policy direction and priorities coming out of that. I think looking at that kind of sustainability lens, whether it's interwoven throughout each of the different sections that we develop, things like energy efficient housing, green building materials, infill, pedestrian connectivity, all have varying climate impacts that may not directly be reflected in a standalone climate section. As the Falmouth, Maine example had just finished, their climate action plan had very specific climate related goals that were included in that section. So things to think about as we're going forward for all of you as well.
Okay, thank you. Our next meeting is August 26th, Tuesday, right here. Again, I think I'd like to thank all of the staff and the consultants for all the work you've done. Done very good work, and it's appreciated by the committee. I'll also give you an advance notice. The senior college in Lewis and Auburn sponsors courses throughout the year, primarily for seniors that want to continue learning. And occasionally I'm asked to make a presentation, and I've been asked to give a class at the senior college. Will be at the Auburn Public Library in the Androscoggin Room, dealing with comprehensive planning in the city of Auburn. So I'll be doing that on October 14th. It's a Tuesday at 1 o'clock. It's in addition to being in person, they also carry it by Zoom. So people from have access to Zoom anywhere can tune in to do that. So I've got to do some homework before then so I can make a presentation. Is there anything else the committee wants to add or comment? Again, thank you for all the work that you're doing, and I think I'll accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
Second. All those in favor? Unanimous. We're all ready to go.